Issue 141. We start out with Sonic and Tails in a house in the Haunted Zone, where once a year on Halloween the ghosts come out. Sonic says that he had promised himself he'd spend Halloween here at least once, I guess to prove to himself that he's not a coward. And then he says that nobody asked Tails to come along, calling him Buddy at least, and teases that he's probably scared. If he's scared, then why did he come along with them? I guess to prove he isn't a coward? Tails lies that he just thought it was a waste of time. Tails tells Sonic a myth about how some hunters spent the night here years ago and they vanished. So they became ghosts? Sonic then scares Tails by running around in a blue blur, making it look like there's a ghost around. And after Tails calls him out on not being funny, Sonic just says, "Lighten up, will you, Pixel Brain?" Not showing him any sympathy at all. Sonic again lampshades how Tails is giving exposition to the audience about the zone's former gold mine wealth, when he already knows this himself. It would have been more natural to have a text box tell us that, like it always does when it's introducing new zones. Sonic reveals that the people of this zone had dug into an ancient burial ground and the place was cursed. I like that they explained that. He calls Tails little buddy for once and reassures him that they'll be fine, telling him to trust him. And then suddenly acts a bit menacing, looking at Tails and pointing while saying, "You do trust me, don't you, Tails?" Yeesh, first he's acting like the nicest he's ever been to him, after being a total bully. And then this happens at the drop of a hat. What a mood swinger. It just take him hitting Tails to make it an abusive relationship. But again, I love this alternate interpretation of Sonic. He's an anti-hero, the anti-Mario, and he's supposed to be snarky. It's fascinating seeing a Sonic who's only a hero because he does heroic deeds and is totally evil and selfish otherwise. It's a very refreshing take in the character that makes it feel like this Sonic has the most personality out of them all. Being menacing again, he tells Tails to prove he trusts him, while Tails stutters asking how he could prove it like he's scared. Sonic picks up a stick and says that if he trusts him completely, he'll stand perfectly still. Tails naturally says, "What?" And Sonic elaborates that he'll miss him by a millimeter. Tails asks him if he's alright, since he's never acted like this before. So either he's planning on hitting a ghost in a subtle way and can't tell Tails what he's doing, or disappointingly, this isn't the real Sonic, but a ghost masquerading as him, which would invalidate him saying little buddy and being threatening to Tails because it wasn't Sonic after all. Tails flies away, proving that he doesn't completely trust Sonic. Gee, I wonder why. And he realizes Sonic was aiming to hit him. How could he tell from that angle? Sonic breaks the stick and some green monsters show up, with Sonic saying out of nowhere that he's got some new friends. So either he's pulling a cruel prank on him, or this really isn't Sonic, or it's a bad dream. A gremlin tells Sonic to take an amulet that's meant to send evil away. Ironic, since you'd think that would keep the gremlin away. And Sonic punches Tails, saying, I've wanted to do that for years." I love seeing this, ironically enough. I don't know, it's just refreshing. I'm sure it's not the real Sonic though, because the comic would never have the guts to actually go through with Sonic actually wanting to punch him, and have there be consequences. Plus it comes out of nowhere. Maybe Sonic thinks this isn't the real Tails. Either way, this is possibly the panel that would make Sonic look the most like a douche out of context. Man, imagine if someone made a video of this and showed it to people out of context. Sonic puts on an amulet saying that he's now one of the gremlins. I guess he was brainwashed. I like to point out that when you're hypnotized, you can only be forced to do the things that you wouldn't really be morally opposed to doing. For example, you can't hypnotize someone into stealing money. So if Sonic was merely hypnotized, that would prove that he has wanted to hit Tails for years. An oddly specific thing of him to decide to say when he didn't have to. It's suspicious that he even said that unnecessarily to begin with. Tails says that the evil in this town is taking control of Sonic's mind after Sonic says he's gonna kill him, calling him a cute little fox. I think it's more that it's completely taken away his inhibitions. When he's Super Sonic, he has none, and he gets into how much he loves fighting, trying to destroy and kill everything in sight because he has no inhibitions whatsoever. Maybe this is a similar situation with his mind. I mean, he's calling Tails cute, and since when does he do that? He even called him cute as Super Sonic. Maybe it's implying that he really does think Tails is cute, and would never admit it because he'd look like a softie, so it's loosening his inhibitions. I'm sure the writer's boring, bland intent was just that he was brainwashed and whatever, but looking at it like this is more fun. Tails flies away, needing some time to think, and we cut to midnight where he still doesn't know what to do. And disappointingly, we don't even see a hint of Tails crying from the scary and heartbreaking situation of, his big brother punching him, being abusive to him. Brainwashed or not, he'd be reacting a bit worse than this. Tails goes back to Sonic when Halloween's about to end, and the gremlin says that it's almost time for them all to go back to the underworld, talking as if Sonic's always been in there and just recently escaped. Actually, that would explain a few things. So what were they doing all this time when Tails was gone? Just standing there? Tails steals the amulet that Sonic was wearing by flying fast, and it's revealed to be the charm that will let Sonic enter the underworld. Why didn't they let him enter the underworld right away? What did the ghosts have to gain in luring people to the underworld in the first place? It's so forced. Sonic then asks what's happening, and says that Tails let him fall asleep, even though he's clearly standing up. And he complains about how now he'll never find out the truth about this place. They should revisit it next year with a video camera. Sonic complains that Tails can't even help to keep him awake, basically calling him useless. The story infuriatingly ends with Tails not telling him about what happened and getting to see his reaction to it. Even though you think Tails wouldn't want to put up with Sonic thinking that he was so useless that he couldn't even keep him from falling asleep standing up for hours on end. Why would Sonic think that in the first place? Was he really aware of everything and just going along with it to prank Tails? I'd like to point out that we only have one line from Tails that Sonic's mind was taking control of, and nobody else, not even the gremlins, talk about Sonic being brainwashed, which is kind of odd. I mean, you'd think that if Sonic was brainwashed, the gremlins would be bragging about it, because why wouldn't they? Sonic's brainwashed, so we can't do anything about it. And Tails mentioned that he was brainwashed, and that didn't do anything to him. In the next story, the Colonel says that he's about to become one of the most important figures in history with time traveling to the West. He plans to establish a base here and take over America with its military's more advanced weaponry. You know, while it's cool to see him as a bigger threat, there was no indication that he'd want to take over the world, and that he was anything other than just the typical military colonel, reacting in a typical way to aliens. It feels like a Ron the Death Eater exaggerating his ability out of nowhere. I was gonna correct myself that he just wanted to invade America, but no, it's the world. The sheriff shoots the gun of one of the colonel's soldiers, rather than the soldier himself, and the heroes push Colonel and the soldiers back to their lab in the present day. That was easy. The Colonel threatens to make Amy suffer if Techno won't let him try to kill every Mobian with her genius. Techno sets the coordinates on the machine for her planet because apparently she knows where her planet is in relation to everywhere else in the universe now. And Amy somehow flips the Colonel despite being held from behind. And Techno somehow set the portal they went through to self-destruct. So many somehows. This isn't a satisfying ending because it logically never should have happened. The whole story never should have happened. Why is the Colonel able to time travel? Did he meet a wizard? The building is set on fire, and a scientist coughs and says he has a copy of the coordinates to Mobius. Wait, did he force the professor who got them back to Mobius to make the time machine? Or at least to make the portal to Mobius? They don't even explain that. What happened to the professor? The story ends with them planning to rebuild the project, and we don't see them escape the building with those coordinates in hand somehow. Really, they should just burn to death since they're surrounded by fire and smoke, with no firemen in sight, but whatever. No sense wasting a villain. In the next story, we see some ghosts rising from an edgy named zone like they do every 50 years instead of always being around for some reason. Tails is told about them by a civilian and doubts their existence for some reason, even though Sonic saw ghosts in Sandopolis, and Tails literally just saw ghosts take over Sonic in the first story. I guess this takes place before it. The ghosts start scaring everyone in the village, with Tails worrying about the realistic consequence that they could cause all sorts of accidents by doing so. Yeah, car accidents in particular. Tails flies in the tornado, tells the people below through a megaphone that the ghosts can't hurt anyone since they're intangible, and lures the ghosts to them. Tails flies away with the ghosts chasing him, as I wonder why ghosts don't just possess people, since that's supposed to be the other threatening thing they can do. Instead they're worthless because they can't, they're intangible. I don't know, that seems like a missed opportunity of the comic. And they disappear early because he lured them to a different time zone where it is midnight. And the last story is just a reprint. The first story is by Nigel Kitchings. It is about Sonic suddenly being taken control of by ghosts that only show up after he tries to get Tails to prove he trusts them by trying to miss hitting him with a stick. He was calling him Little Buddy right before that, so is that the ghost talking? If Sonic wasn't brainwashed, he'd be acting pretty abusive since he even tries to kill Tails. not to mention punch him, only for Tails to fly away and Sonic to not go after him at all for no reason, since he would have caught up to him and found him easily if he did. So what was Sonic doing for all those hours? Just standing there with the ghost? That must have been boring. Why wouldn't the gremlins let Sonic go after Tails? Why wouldn't the gremlins go with Sonic if he has to be around them to keep being brainwashed? It would have made sense if it was established that Tails spent the last few hours running away from Sonic. Why would a text box say that an amulet is meant to ward off evil if the way it's being used in the story doesn't match up with that? It should be warding off the ghost then, not keeping him with them. The biggest plot hole in the story that makes it illogical that it even happened is that there's no reason for the ghost not to possess Tails too. There's ghosts all over the place and they would have won if they just had him brainwashed too. What I didn't like about this interesting story was the ending. Because rather than us having a sweet moment where Sonic apologizes for Tails' bad experience and reassures him that he'd never hit him, Tails refuses to tell him the truth about what happened that night. Not even saying he wouldn't believe him, even though it means accepting Sonic thinking he's so useless that he can't even keep him from falling asleep. Why would Sonic ever think that he fell asleep when he was standing up the whole time? What, was he lying to get an excuse to insult Tails? Tails and Sonic really don't do enough communication for a strong friendship if Tails won't tell him about what happened out of nowhere. There's a lot of things that Tails doesn't tell Sonic. Also, it's unusual that he said he wanted to hit Tails for years. Did the ghost invade his mind and see his memories and know that he's known Tails for years and want that? I prefer to look at it as him losing all of his inhibitions instead, since he also calls Tails cute, which wouldn't match up with him purely just being turned evil. Why would the ghost ever admit that Tails was cute, let alone think it? The rest of the issue is by Lou Stringer. The second story has the Colonel try to take over Earth with his army, which comes out of nowhere since he used to be just a typical Colonel. And Techno and Amy escape his grip in a very contrived way that makes no sense. And the third story is about Tails meeting some ghosts that for some reason only show up every 50 years. And right after a story that was about the ghosts possessing people, these ghosts don't possess anybody, and instead are completely harmless because they're intangible. Are there multiple different types of ghosts? And some can possess and some can't? Tails lures the ghosts to another time zone where it is midnight to make them vanish. It's clever. It's him using his intelligence again to save the day, which is what I like about him. It kind of makes him a stronger protagonist than Sonic, because you always expect that Sonic will just spin dash and use his super speed, but you never expect how exactly Tails will save the day.